We're all doing the best we can on this journey of life with the information that we have. And until we learn new, we can't do any better, right? But I've learned that if you actually allow yourself to acknowledge what you are feeling, no matter how good or bad, it will move through you so much faster. So, where I'm like, all right, I don't feel like myself, maybe I'm getting a little depressed today. I acknowledge it. And then it's like the next thing you know, like 5 minutes later, I've picked up something to distract myself. And now it's like that feeling's gone.
When we look at the world around us, we typically see a serene landscape, but what makes life complicated from time to time is the mental space we all inhabit. Jennifer Nevel is here on the podcast today to share her experiences about her own mental health struggles and how she was able to find hope in gratitude for this life and the practices to help heal. I want to thank Jennifer for being on the podcast today, for sharing her story, and for being a shining light for others. It's important to remember that healing is always possible and that tomorrow is a new day. Be sure to share this episode. Let me know what you think of it. And thank you for listening. I hope you have a great day. Welcome back to the Stories by Joe podcast. I appreciate you being here today. Today, we're here with Jennifer Nevel, and we're here to talk a little bit about her life story and all the things that she has faced in life and what she continues to do to this day. So, Jennifer, I just want to ask you a brief question. Can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and where you come from?
Thank you for having me. First, let me start by saying that. So, I am a special education teacher and I am a mom of two adult children at this point. I basically grew up in Orange County, so I've spent pretty much my entire life in Orange County, but I've moved around quite a bit over the years.
I know that a lot of your story revolves around mental health and growing up, we we don't really talk about mental health like when we're young. We don't really contemplate it. When we're born, we're kind of not obviously we're not giving a like an instruction manual as to how to live life, and we're kind of just thrown into the world and expected to just learn as we go. I wanted to ask when you were younger or how at whatever age, when did mental health become something that you've began to think about and actively became a part of your life?
Growing up, I don't feel like I ever really paid mind to it. Looking back now, I don't think I was really struggling other than learning how to control my emotions, which was something that really wasn't taught to me. But again, just like we come into this world and we don't know what to expect or how to behave, our parents aren't given a manual as to how to raise us either. So, my mental health really didn't come into play until I was a mom. I have two adult children now. My daughter will be 23 next month, and my son is 21. And when I was married to their dad, I don't think I realized that I was in an emotionally abusive relationship until our daughter, who was a little over 2, started screaming at me. And then I realized something really wasn't right. And so I was facing a toxic marriage, raising two babies, and trying to figure out the world. I ended up leaving that marriage because one physical event happened and that caused our marriage to end. I had to put my children first and I moved on with life. But then I think probably 2 years after that is when I fell into a really bad depression. And it could be from recovering from a toxic marriage, it could be from life events prior that I probably didn't think were toxic to me. But yeah, I was in my late 20s when my mental health really started to take a turn for the worse. And I battled depression for probably more than 10 years.
How did battling depression look like for you? Like, how did that manifest in your life? Because a lot of times we think of depression and we have a stereotypical image that comes into our head, but depression manifests itself in so many different ways in all different kinds of people.
For me, depression was still getting up and going to work every day as a teacher, still showing up to all of my kids' events, going to different sporting events, concerts, any activity. It didn't matter. Like, I still showed up for life. And honestly, I was living a life in hiding. Like, the only people that knew that I was suffering was the people that I lived in my house with and my parents. Other than that, the outside world really didn't know what was going on. I do remember there was a time where I would be going out socializing and I would come home and I would be told that people thought I was kind of stuck up, that I didn't want to socialize. And it wasn't that I didn't want to socialize, but I didn't even want to be on the planet. So to be in a party with other people that are happy, and it's not that I was upset that they were happy and I wasn't, but I was literally like not having a clue as to how to manage depression and anxiety in a room full of people. So I kind of retracted in bigger events, but for the most part, no one had any idea that I was suffering other than my immediate family.
When was the moment that you realized that what you were suffering with was depression? Because I know with a lot of people that have anxiety, depression, and other mental health struggles they deal with, um, the journey becomes radically different once they actually know what it is. I think a lot of people experience depression and anxiety in their life, and but they don't even fully understand what it is until they're actually able to apply that label to what they're feeling. When did you finally sit back and realize, oh, I am having these thoughts, I am experiencing depression?
That is a very good question. I don't know that I could actually pinpoint it. It was more like my family was like, something's not right. Like, you need to see a counselor, you need to go see a psychiatrist. And I actually wasn't given the label of depression until the very end of my journey. I was given a variety of different labels: bipolar, mm, multiple personality disorder. And it wasn't until the very end where I was diagnosed with treatment resistant depression, because everything that I was trying in my journey was not working for me.
Do you think you had depression at all when you were growing up, but you just didn't have the word for it? Or was this something that manifested itself in your life after the events that you were talking about with the relationship?
I want to say it could have been a combination of the traumatic relationship and maybe the hormonal changes of becoming a mother. Like, people don't think about the fact that women's bodies change so much in life between being a little girl and then being an adult and giving birth and then the later stages of life and going through menopause and all of that. Like, our hormones are changing so much. So it could have been a combination of a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, I mean, being a mother and having to going through all of these struggles, I imagine adds such another dimension to it because you have to be there for others. That they're they're reliant on you. How did you navigate your relationship with your children while also navigating this journey that you had to undergo with depression?
There were times that I was doing a lot of sleeping, even though I was with my kids. I was in another marriage after my first marriage, and so I did have the support of my husband at the time to help with the kids when I was feeling depressed. But I also, like I said, I still showed up. The thing is that my kids had no idea what they were getting from me depending on the day. Like, yes, I would show up to their events and their activities and I'd be cheering them on, but then there were days that I was flipping out on them for whatever reason. Like, I was just triggered by something in the moment. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel heard. And it was like World War II in my house. I would literally be throwing stuff, chasing people around the house, slamming doors, crying hysterically. So they grew up and it was not easy for them. I really like felt guilty over that for a long time because I'm the adult, I'm the mom, I'm supposed to be the one keeping it all together no matter what's going on in our world, and I'm supposed to let my kids know that they're safe and that I have them and I'm there to protect them, and I felt like I was not really doing that for them.
I can imagine that adds a whole other layer of pressure and further
Guilt and
exacerbates.
guilt and shame, and yeah. Like, I would be okay, then I would have some kind of episode. I would flip out at whoever was home for whatever was going on, and then I would be hysterically crying because I felt bad that I did this, and then I would apologize, and then I would try and do better, but it was this cycle that just continued over and over for years. I mean, I had a couple of hospitalizations in there to try and get medications to work, and as soon as they stopped working, I was not mellow anymore, like, it was back to the same frustrations and same erratic behavior.
How long did this whole process undergo from first identifying that you were struggling with your mental health to ultimately finding some sort of mechanism to help heal? How long has had that process been? And can you shed a little bit of light on that?
I would say that the process probably took 12 or 13 years from beginning to, I'd say, the beginning of the end, like from when I first knew something was wrong until I came to the beginning of the healing journey.
And is there ever really an end, or is it more so, in your opinion, it's kind of a gradual learning and healing process that it probably, I mean, probably takes up our entire lives, right? But what is your opinion on that?
I don't know that I will ever be the same person I was. I mean, I'm far better now than I was when I was suffering. But I feel like mental health awareness is not like the month of May for me. It is every single day of my life. And I'm doing really well right now. But it is always in the back of my mind, like, will I ever get back to that place? And I don't expect to because I do have so many different coping techniques now that work. I'm not on any medication. I haven't been on medication for quite a few years now. So I've learned different ways to navigate life. And even on the hardest days, I realize that, like, I'm valuable. I belong here. I'm worthy. I'm loved. Things that I wasn't feeling when I was struggling. And I wasn't, I was feeling like a burden back then. I don't feel like a burden like now. If somebody asks me, how are you doing? If I'm not doing okay, I'm going to say I'm not okay. Like, and I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to be like, yeah, I'm great. Like, if I'm not great, I'm not great. There are days I recognize now that, like, all right, I'm not feeling like myself. And I kind of just look within and I say, okay, I'm going to be okay. Whatever's going on, everything's going to be okay. And it's like you let the feelings run through you and then they leave so much faster. Where when I was really suffering, I was not wanting to feel those feelings. Nobody wants to feel these negative feelings, right? We always want to be happy. And so when something negative comes our way, we're like suppressing it or we're trying to say, nope, I'm not going to feel it. And then it just sticks with you longer. So back when I was depressed, I was feeling ashamed of that because even as much as like my family tried to love and support me, like they could never say anything that was like the right thing at that time. Not because they weren't trying, but they didn't know any better or any different. So I can't fault them for that now. Couldn't fault them for that back then, but I did. I was like, why don't you know what to say to me? Like, you should be making me feel better. And the only person that can really take ownership of it is ourselves. So we're all doing the best we can on this journey of life with the information that we have. And until we learn new, we can't do any better, right? But I've learned that if you actually allow yourself to acknowledge what you are feeling, no matter how good or bad, it will move through you so much faster. So, where I'm like, all right, I don't feel like myself, maybe I'm getting a little depressed today. I acknowledge it. And then it's like the next thing you know, like 5 minutes later, I've picked up something to distract myself. And now it's like that feeling's gone.
How much of the struggle do you think is about ourselves comparing where we are currently now to how we used to feel in the past? How when you were younger, maybe you felt a specific way, and then as time went on, you're comparing yourself to how you felt then. Do you think that plays a role in the process?
I think I just kind of felt like, well, I have a good life. So why am I feeling this way? That was like when this was all going down, I'm like, I have a lot to be thankful for. So why do I just feel like complete garbage? And why do I not want to be here? And I didn't really understand it.
You tried different treatments and you tried different different mechanisms to try to help heal or kind of overcome those feelings. Uh, how how was that process like? I know you said you went on medication and
That
you
was
were
a
off.
long process. So, of course, you start out with one medication, and then one medication turned into two because it's this isn't working, and oh, let's raise your dose, or oh, let's add this. So, in addition to doing therapy, I was seeing a psychiatrist, and they would put me on meds, and they would work for a couple weeks, couple months, depending on the protocol, and then they would stop. I did have three hospitalizations over the course of my battle. Two were very short. The very first one that I went into the hospital with, I was there for a couple of days and I was actually overdosed on medication. And so I had to leave. They gave me a prescription and I was so lightheaded and nauseous and I threw up in like the common area and they yelled at me for throwing up, but I couldn't literally could not walk to a bathroom to like go throw up. Like it just came out. And they yelled at me for that, and then I called my husband at the time and I was like, "Come get me, like, this is not working." The second treatment was another week in a hospital, and same thing, they kinda get you level, and then they send you on your way. They don't teach you too much in the hospital, they give you a little bit of, like, some strategies, but they're not really giving you a lot. They're trying to adjust your meds, and then say, "Okay, in a week, now you're fine." I don't know how a week is gonna be long enough to tell you that, but hey, that's just me. I'm not the expert. And then I spent 3 weeks in another hospital. I actually found my way through a loophole to get myself put into a treatment facility that was actually for those with addiction. So I had a medication that I was taking that you're not supposed to take yourself off of. You're supposed to come off through the support of your physician or your psychiatrist. And I had already taken myself off of it because it wasn't working, but I decided that I was going to put a couple of those pills in my mouth and get into that hospital. My doctor at the time did get me in. And that was actually the best of all of my stays because that one actually, they, like an Alcoholics Anonymous or NA, they actually like did like a whole program with you. Like you got up at 5 a.m. and you were dancing because if you can dance not on any drugs or alcohol, then you can live life, right? And then they had all these different seminars and you got to pick which ones would work for you that you wanted to do. They had some yoga classes, they had different therapy sessions and different activities that you could choose to do that's working on building your skills and your coping mechanisms. So that was actually the most amazing one. And yes, of course, they were monitoring your meds as well. But again, after 3 weeks there, and I was like, I gotta go home. I have two kids at home that I need to get home to. Eventually those meds stopped working too. I also did a process TMS therapy, and I did that twice. And what they do with that, I cannot remember what that actually stands for. But if you've ever heard of the practice, basically they bring you in and they map your brain and then for 45 minutes, they tapped on this side of my brain, and then 15 minutes, they tapped on this side of the brain. So the 45 minutes was for depression, the 15 minutes was for anxiety. When I went through that practice, it was 5 days a week for 4 weeks, and then they would gradually bring you down. So it was over a couple of months. And eventually, like you're supposed to be good to go, that stopped working. I did that process a second time, and the second time it did not last as well as the first time. So at that point, between everything I had tried, I was really frustrated because I'm like, how is nothing working for me? Like you're thinking, okay, I'm working with psychiatrists, I'm working with therapists. Why am I not feeling better? And so eventually I had to figure it out on my own.
So I would imagine at that point, that's going to be a pretty low point where you've tried all of these things and nothing appears to be working.
Right.
How did that feel? What was like? What were some of the like the real low points for you in your journey? If you don't mind sharing.
Well, I won't share the details of it, but I had tried to end my life more than once. So, yeah, those were some low points for me, obviously. And One of those instances, my children were in the house and I was outside. Thankfully, that was not successful because my kids needed me.
When was the first moment where you realized that healing was possible, and what opened that window? What was that point that really began the process, that kind of inception point for you?
Okay, so where are we? About 6 years ago now, I not only was still on the medications for all of my mental health, but I've also was on medicine for my thyroid not functioning properly, and I was put on heart medicine. And I went into the emergency room thinking I was having a heart attack, and here I am on heart medicine at 41 years old. And turns out that it was just a reaction between all of the meds that I was on. And as soon as that happened, I left the hospital and I took myself off of everything. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, here I think I'm dying on heart medicine. I'm not having a heart attack, thankfully, but this isn't working. If this is the result of everything that I'm on and I'm not even feeling phenomenal on it all, I took myself off of everything. I had to get my tubes tied so I can come off birth control pills. I took myself off of everything but thyroid medicine because obviously you need that. And I wasn't even sure that I needed the heart medicine. So I took myself off of that. And I think that's when everything started to change. I'm not knocking medication at all, and I'm not knocking therapy at all. They didn't work for me when I was suffering. I'm going to say for me personally, I feel like the interaction of all the meds is why I tried to end my own life. Whether it was just that I was having a reaction because they say on these TV shows or the commercials, like, can cause suicidal tendencies. I think to myself now, why would you ever prescribe something that's only going to potentially make my symptoms worse, right? I taken myself off of everything and I was like, well, I just need to figure this out because nothing is working for me. I got to figure it out. And once I came off of all of those meds, then I actually started to become more aware of what I was going through and I felt more like stable than I had been feeling. I was just like, I just have to figure it out. And I don't have an option at this point. Like, nothing's working. And then I just started with practicing gratitude, is where it probably all changed for me. So, it's November right now. Back in the day, like when Facebook first started, it was, oh, today I'm grateful for whatever on Thanksgiving, right? And then it turned into all of a sudden, all of November is I'm grateful for today. Like, I don't know, do your friends post that like the whole month of November? Today I'm grateful for this. Today I'm grateful for that. So I had some friends doing that. And I kind of missed the boat. And I was still kind of feeling depressed. But I was like, all right, didn't make the November 1st post or the November 2nd post. But for whatever reason, I was sparked with, I'm going to do this for a full year. I'd seen a friend of mine who is a photographer, and every day in that same year, he was posting a picture that he had captured with his camera. It's just his hobby, right? He would post a picture and put a little blurb about something he took a picture of. And so I decided for whatever reason that I was going to post every day on Facebook, two Facebook pages actually, something I was grateful for. I took a picture and I posted it. And this is what I'm grateful for today. And I think I didn't understand it back then, but that was actually me changing my own mindset and shifting everything that was going on in my brain. I didn't realize it back then. I know it now. Like, what you focus on is what you're going to attract. Again, there are people that have depression and they can take one pill and it's treating them, and that's amazing. I would never tell anybody to go off your meds. I'm not supporting that. But for me, with treatment resistant depression, all I was focused on was how life was hard and life sucked and it was all negative. So by doing this gratitude practice somewhere in there, my mindset started to shift. And even on like the hardest days, I was like, well, I already kind of said I was going to do this every day. I made it a public thing. I'm now holding myself accountable to everybody else who's possibly judging me if I don't show up and do it today. I know now people don't care that much about my life. It's like they're too busy in their own lives, right? But when I was sick, it was like, oh, everybody's looking at me, everybody's judging me, everybody's waiting for me to fail to say she didn't do it. So I kind of forced myself to do it for a year, and that's where my mindset really started to shift. And now, like, there's just so much more to be grateful for.
That's awesome. Wow. Yeah, I know with some people describe medication and how they try to use medication to overcome depression and anxiety, and they say that it feels in a way sometimes like a crutch to them, and it's not actually solving the problem. It's more of like kind of masking things. I know it's different for everyone,
Right.
um, but I understand that in a way. It sounds like what you're saying is that what really helped to heal you was a fundamental change of mindset, right? Because I feel like we a lot of times we think of anxiety and depression as like, oh, there's something wrong with my brain, something structurally wrong, and I need to figure out like, oh, maybe like if I ingest this chemical or if I do something different, it'll change it, it'll fix something. But a lot of times we just need to look at how we interact with our own lives and have that change of attitude and change of mindset, and that really begins the process of making us fundamentally in a better place. So would you say that it was really for you the change of mindset is what started you down the journey of healing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a book by Byron Katie, I believe it's called Loving What Is. And one of the things that she talks about in there is that mm, essentially our feelings and our emotions, these negative things, they're coming into our world because we're not living the life we were born to live. And that was some eye opening stuff to read because it's like, all right, so I'm feeling angry. Why am I feeling angry? Well, something in my world doesn't resonate with me and where I'm meant to be. Maybe it's I'm not showing up for myself in the way I'm supposed to be showing up for myself, and I'm showing up the way somebody else expects me to show up instead of being true to who I am. So even like depression and anxiety is saying, okay, something's not sitting right with you. And you have to really look within and figure out what it is that's not sitting well with you. But we're kind of taught like don't have so many emotions. Like women, don't be so emotional. Men, suck it up, like be a man. So where is anybody teaching us that it's okay to have feelings and it's okay to have loud and expressive feelings? I mean, obviously we don't want to be flipping out on somebody, but these loud emotions that come out, it's like they're there for a reason to teach us that something's not right and we need to do something different. We just need the tools to figure out how to do whatever it is that we need to do. And first, it starts with looking within ourselves to figure out why we're feeling this emotion.
How do you feel about the idea of people identifying with a mental health situation, mental health struggle? I've heard people say before that they they are not a depressed person. They are a person experiencing depression, trying to remove that identification with the mental health struggle they're dealing with.
And that's people first language to say that I'm a person and I'm a person experiencing something. So I do think that that's an important way to look at things only because there is such a stigma around mental health still. I mean, it's getting better, but it still has a long way to go, right? So people look at you differently because you're depressed or because you have anxiety and they treat you differently sometimes. So to say I'm a person, like, and I'm a valuable person, and yeah, I may be experiencing depression or anxiety, doesn't take away from the wonderful person I am. It just means I am dealing with something.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of want to go back to what you're talking about before about practicing gratitude. I think that it's super important, actually, like waking up every day and thinking of just a couple things that you're grateful for and why life is worth living. I mean, there's so many things that make this life beautiful and so many blessings that we have in life. So, how did you go from having your month of November, your gratitude month, and then eventually that becoming the year of gratitude for you? How did that set the trajectory for you for continuing to heal?
Somewhere in there, my mindset just started to shift and life didn't suck so much anymore. And then it was like, okay, I feel a little lighter today than I felt yesterday, and I can get through today. And then it just kind of led me down a rabbit hole of so many other things. Mm, I started working with my girlfriend who was going to school for coaching, like life coaching. She was actually going to school for something else, but she had to take like a coaching class and she needed volunteers. And so I've known her since like middle school and I was like, I'll do it. And that led me to the next step of my journey, which was taking responsibility and taking action. Like, again, I didn't realize that my mindset was shifting, but now I had to take action for where I was in life. And so I found that working with a coach is so different than going to therapy. And it had to have me look within myself more and figure out what is it that I need to do for me to get to where I want to be in life. Like, yes, I'm making progress, but I need to continue to do more and figure out what it is that I need to do that's going to allow me to heal because I still wasn't fully healed. Like I said, I don't know that I'll ever fully be healed, but I feel phenomenal compared to years ago. So,
I think life is a journey, and then we're just kind of like learning as we go. Definitely, I think that's every for everyone.
right.
Um, yeah. So you're talking about a difference between like coaching and therapy. Can you go a little bit more into detail about the difference between the two and how the coaching aspect really helped you more so rather than the therapy process?
Talk therapy is what most people do. Like, I've done talk therapy and I did like behavioral therapy. Behavioral therapy gives you some of the tips of different things you can do to cope in certain scenarios. And then, of course, talk therapy is you go in and you're like, okay, what happened this week? And it's, oh, this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. But you're not really getting to the root of your issues, right? In either form of therapy. Um, where coaching, you, like I said, you kind of have to look within yourself and you have to figure out your solutions for yourself with the guide of a coach as to what resonates with you, how to move forward. So I actually feel like, so I learned this past summer in a coaching training that I took, a trauma informed training. Here's how I can put it. So when I took this trauma informed training over the summer, they talked about when you are going through some form of trauma, whatever it could be the smallest little thing or a tremendous thing. Anytime we experience trauma in life, we go through this thing called a trauma loop. So some event happens, we don't feel safe, and then if we go through the whole process of emotions with the safety net of either a resource or another human that can help us through, we should get back to the feeling of being safe. And then we'll have been able to deal with that trauma no matter how big or small, and now we can move forward in life. But a lot of us, when we're in talk therapy, you are continuing that trauma loop because you're just reliving the same stuff that's been going on and you're not getting to that point where you feel safe. I, I was talking about this on a different podcast actually, but we talked about the fact that if you are seeing a therapist when you are depressed or full of anxiety, it's almost like it's too late to start that process. Again, I'm not knocking it because therapy does work for people. And I'll tell you right now, I'm actually seeing the same therapist now that I was seeing when I was depressed. I saw her individually, I saw her with my children, for my family. But there was nothing she could do or say that was gonna make me feel safe in that moment of time. Now I see her because I'm in a healthy headspace, and now I can work through some of the things because again, I'm in a healthy headspace. So therapy works, but it's more so for the people that are not in this traumatic space. And if you are feeling so depressed and now you're going to see a therapist, you're going to live in that depression by continuing to talk through your feelings.
You start to have these small victories every day and you begin to go walk down the path towards healing. But when was it, like, for example, with your kids, did they begin to notice at a certain point, like, oh, wow, like Mom seems different. Like she seems like she's doing pretty good. Did that come about at some point?
It did come about at some point, but I don't think they came to me. It was more that I went to them to, like, I knew I was starting to get to a place where I was feeling better. And like I said, when I was struggling and they were exposed to all of this stuff, I was so ashamed by what I was putting them through and knowing that I was like damaging my kids, that as I started to get to the other end where I'm like, okay, I'm starting to feel better and I'm not losing my stuff every day. Like, I sat them down to have a conversation and I apologized for everything that they were experiencing with my erratic behavior. And I explained to them why this was going on. Like, obviously, when they're growing up, they don't need to understand mom's depressed. Like, they're just like, whoa, why is mom so upset right now? Kind of thing. But as they were getting older, it was easier to now have that conversation.
That's great. So, in addition to coaching, were there any other materials, any other resources that you found particularly useful for helping you change your mindset?
Yes, actually. So after I did the coaching with my friend, then I actually met another person who's now my mentor. And I did something called timeline technique. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or if NLP. So NLP is neuro linguistic programming, which is all about the language we use with each other. And so I met this guy, Mark, on Facebook, of all places. I didn't know who he was, but I was drawn to his profile. And again, I was still in a phase of life that I'm like, people are judging me, or like, why doesn't this person want to be my friend on Facebook kind of thing. But for whatever reason, I was drawn to him. And then I reached out to him. I sent him a friend request and I reached out to him, which was so not what I was about at that time of life. But then I realized why now. It's because he was doing this process called timeline technique, which is something where you go through your timeline and you go back to like the very first time you ever felt the five major emotions. So the first one is anger. You go through your timeline and figure out the very first time you felt angry. And there's a lesson as to why we feel our emotions, as I was starting to explain a little earlier in the podcast. So all of our emotions we're experiencing is for some positive learning that we're supposed to take from it and then grow. He brought me back through my timeline through all the emotions, and then basically you have to figure out the lesson, and then he brings you back through your timeline to the present moment, and you carry this lesson through every experience that you've had from that very first experience until now. And then it actually just like dissolves from you. So like where I was like flipping out on my family and loved ones because I was depressed and angry, like, just completely stopped. Like, do I still get angry now? Of course. I mean, I'm a human. There are times that I'm going to get angry, but, like, I'm not flipping out in, like, a second. Like, it takes a lot for me to get to the point where I'm, like, really angry and then I'll raise my voice or whatever. But so, like, by going through the major emotions and kind of letting them go, it's a pretty quick process. Like, I worked with him for all of like 15 hours, and not just on timeline technique, but other NLP practices that helped me to heal through some of these emotions. Like, I even got to heal through the trauma of an abusive marriage and physical abuse without actually having to talk about it. Like, you'll feel it, and like, you'll have some moments where you're like teary eyed, but like, if you're talking about the fact that you got the crap beat out of you by somebody that you love, like, it's natural to be like crying through something so traumatic. Look, I just talked about it and I didn't even like bat an eyelash. So, like, that was the next big piece in my journey, was like letting go of all these emotions that I was just stuffing inside that I didn't know how to get out because I was always told, nope, don't yell. That's not appropriate. Don't behave like that.
When you're looking back at this timeline, I mean, your life, when you're going through all of this, actually taking a deep dive and looking at your life analytically, were there moments where you completely forgot about these intense feelings, these emotions, anger, and amongst other emotions, where all the way back in your childhood, you're like, I forgot about this. But then when you look at it analytically, it becomes more clear and it starts to make sense. It's like life is like we have all these puzzle pieces in life. And when you're talking about this timeline here, you go back and you slowly start to put the puzzle pieces together. It becomes a clearer image. Were there moments in life where when you went through this?
That's the funny question, though. Like, the first memories of these things should be between 0 and 7. However, you can have these emotions before you're even born. Like, it can be passed down generationally, or like previous lifetimes. So, like, there was an experience where I was actually a little boy and I was abandoned at a fair by my mother, who then came and like screamed at me. She had walked away from me, but she yelled at me like I had walked away from her. And I was probably 3 or 4 as that little boy. I don't know where that came from, but that was like the very first time I felt the emotion. Probably fear would be that emotion. And I don't remember like all of the memories. Like, I can't visually see everything. Everybody's obviously different. Some people are great at visualizing. I couldn't visualize everything. Like, there were just things that you just kind of felt it in your body as you're going through. And so I can't even tell you what half the experiences were that I was just bringing back to my timeline to heal from. It's a really wild experience. It was so wild that I was like, I got to do this. I got to learn how to do this. And I'm going to do this and help my children because I hurt my children. Come to find out, after all the training, I could not help my children because I'm part of their pain. So somebody else will have to do the same process on them if they're interested. But I got myself trained just so that I could help others, and hopefully they won't suffer as long as I was suffering.
Okay, you kind of touched on like reincarnation there for a second. It's very, kind of interesting. I just wanted to not make a big point of it at all, but when it comes to spirituality in general, does that play a role in the healing process for you? Or was this more so you were just like doing a deep dive into these memories and that's what you pulled up? Or is there like a spiritual element to this healing process?
I don't have that spiritual element. Like, I was not raised with any religion. I do believe that there is something bigger than us. I call it the universe, but I didn't go to church or synagogue or anything. So I don't feel like I have any kind of spirituality in that respect. I just know that there's something bigger out there that has a plan for us that we don't always understand.
I agree with you. I believe in God, and acknowledging that there is a the higher power takes the spotlight away from you and makes you understand that you're a piece of a larger whole. That there's a much larger reality out there, whether that you call it God or the universe or something, and you begin to realize exactly what you just said, that there's a bigger plan out there. Is that something that is that an idea that you always had, or is that something that's helped comfort you along your journey?
I didn't have that until recently, until
Interesting.
the healing part of the journey. So, like I said, I wasn't raised with any kind of religion to believe anything. So, think I kind of just thought I had to take care of everything. Like, I'm the one that's got to control everything. It's still hard sometimes to like let go and realize that there is a plan that I don't understand. I try and remind myself of that if I am struggling, but it's only in like my recent healing that I'm like, okay, like I don't have to have it together all the time. This is happening for a reason. I may not understand it in this moment, but the bigger picture, it all makes sense. Like, now it kind of comforts me in the fact that like I went through all that pain and suffering to be where I am right now with building a coaching company and moving into public speaking to help others. And as we talked prior to starting to record, starting to work on writing my book, like all of this was happening for this particular reason. Like, I'm not regretting anything that I went through. It is exactly what I needed to go through to be where I am to help others.
Let's talk about that. You are on your journey of healing. When did that journey begin to change from focusing exclusively on healing yourself to then now helping others and starting your company and actually becoming a coach yourself?
So I had worked with my coach friend Laura, as she was in school. And then shortly after that, it was actually, no, I have to think about that timeline for a second. It was before that happened. So there was a gentleman, James Thomas, who was a student in the building that I teach in, and he died by suicide at the age of 19. That was October of 2018. I was working with my girlfriend in 2019. So when he had died by suicide, I was getting to the point where I knew I was going to be okay and I had to just keep working at it. But I was like, I don't want anybody else to die at such a young age. Like, people need to know that I tried to end my life and I'm here, and life might not be perfect, but I'm still here and I can create a good life for myself. So, between his passing and then working with her, I started a YouTube channel. I had if I had 1 or 2 people watching, it didn't matter. Like, I was just starting to be raw and real and talk about whatever it was I needed to talk about. If nobody watched, it didn't matter. It was still helping me heal, but I was trying to get the word out to try and help others. And I've kinda just taken off running since then.
Nice. It's kind of like putting positive vibes back into the universe, right?
Yes.
That's awesome. So, what does that look like for you? You're talking about a YouTube channel, and now you've started your own company. What are some of the practical things that you have developed to try to help make a difference?
Well, all these different healing techniques that I've learned that I didn't understand prior to this, like the whole timeline technique. I've gotten trained in EFT and TFT tapping, which is to tap against the meridians and change the neurology in your brain, like by doing those practices. So I just continue to like learn and grow and read tons of different books. And I've learned about obviously practicing gratitude and meditation, which I've never done, journaling, like simple techniques that help you to change where you're at that I didn't understand when I was sick and not feeling like myself.
Your job is you're a teacher, right? It
I am a
actually,
special education teacher, yes.
yes, your essential nature in a way is being a teacher, right? So I would imagine it's kind of when you've learned about this healing process and all these techniques that have helped you, I'm sure your natural inclination was, okay, now I gotta share this with the world.
Of course.
That's great. Did all of these practices that you learned and all of these mechanisms, did they help change your teaching style as a special education teacher? Did the two like did that inform the other, and did these two like kind of like work with each other?
Well, I work in an ICT math classroom in an 8th grade classroom. So they don't kind of go together for the most part. I am who I am and I'm very caring individual, obviously. But I work with another teacher, so I don't know if you are familiar. ICT's an inclusion math classroom, integrated co-teaching. So it's me and another teacher working together. And of course, you have to get through your math curriculum. So I try and just hold on to my practices and like just make sure that I'm speaking to the kids the right way and redirecting them in a certain way. And of course, being empathetic for them when they're struggling. I have managed to connect with certain students that I know, like, you can just say, all right, I know this young lady's been through something. I may not know what it is, but I know she's been through something or is going through something. And I try and make sure that I connect with these students more than others. I mean, obviously, you want to connect with all your kids, but if somebody's struggling, you want to make sure they understand they're not alone.
Kind of a side question, just curious. Did meditation help at all in your process?
It helps me now. I'm not sure that it helped me back then. I don't think I actually even tried it back then. What I didn't realize about meditation until recently is that meditation is really focusing on one thing in particular. And for the longest time, I thought meditating meant you had to have no thoughts going through your mind. But it's not. It's like if you're blowing bubbles and you're living in the moment, blowing bubbles, you are actually in a form of meditation, which I didn't understand. So, like, I always tried and then I'm like, "Nope, I'm doing this wrong." So it wasn't until I went a little further in my healing journey to understand that meditation is really just simply focusing on one thing and only one thing. And it's okay to have a thought or 15 thoughts come in your mind. you acknowledge those thoughts and then you kind of put them to the side and you go back to whatever it is that you are focusing on.
Sure, definitely bringing your attention to the present moment using whatever activity or whatever thought process to help bring you into the moment, because I think a lot of times we get lost in just like building up this narrative around us about how we interact with the world and what people might think of us, and when it kind of takes us away from the basic reality of life, that we're just living here now, just living in the moment. The moment's really that all that matters. So yeah, no, I know for me, at least personally, meditation and mindfulness as well really helps with bringing myself into the moment and just makes me feel like an overall better person, just in general. I wanted to ask you, when it comes to having a a support network during this whole process that you've had to go through, how important is it to have people that are there for you to remind yourself that you're not alone in this struggle, that you have people to lean on? How do you relate to that?
I do feel like it's extremely important, mm, but I also understand that not everybody is capable of being that for you. Like I said, my family tried really hard to be there and support me, but they never really said the right thing. What I've come to realize is that it's different when you are connecting with somebody who's been through it than somebody who has no idea what you're experiencing. Like, because somebody's just like, oh, well, just get over it. Don't tell me to just get over it. Like, this is like whatever it comes to. Like, don't tell me to just get over. Like, people don't understand that we are entitled to our feelings and our feelings are valid. You don't have to agree with them in the given moment, whatever we're discussing. But my feelings are my feelings and your feelings are your feelings. And so I have found that it's easier to connect with others even now. I have an easier time connecting with somebody who is struggling or who was struggling than somebody who's never struggled or says they've never struggled because it's just a completely different mindset.
I know you're involved in the community, in like the mental health community as it exists here in the Hudson Valley. How do you interact with people now, especially now that you have a business and you're an advocate in your own right, trying to help people yourself?
I'm meeting new people all the time. So I feel like now, like, my energy just attracts the right people to me at this point in life. But there are times I know that I'm still, like, in the wrong room, like, because 'cause I'm at some kind of event and the people that I'm around, you can just tell that they don't get it, and so I still feel like I'm all alone sometimes in a room full of people because it's just the wrong people. So it is all about surrounding yourself with the people that you connect with and understand that if you're not connecting with whoever you are in company with, that they're just not the right company for you, and that's okay.
I know for you, music is a very important part of your life. Can you tell me about
Yeah.
your relationship with music and how that helps enrich your life?
I probably have always liked music, even when I was a kid. I remember being I can't even remember how old I was, but when We Are the World came out, I don't know how old you are, but were you around for that?
Well, I was born in '95, so
So then, yeah, you definitely were not. That's the year I graduated high school. Wow. Okay, so if you've ever heard of We Are the World, it was a whole bunch of famous musicians coming together, kind of like a fundraising opportunity. And so here's this song, and each person is singing their own part. And I remember being on my porch with my parents, and I was singing every person like as if I was that person. So I've obviously liked music even going back as a kid. But then as I got a little older, I kind of moved away from it and kind of put it aside. I was into sports and boys and working. Life goes on as you grow up, right? Somehow on the other side of the healing journey is where I really found that I have this passion for music that lives within me, that I just need to do music. Unbeknownst to myself, I was volunteering at this organization that's no longer here. It was called Xylophone, and it was working with special needs individuals. And it was music and art therapy. And the woman who ran that place had sent me on a band audition, and I didn't even realize I was going on a band audition. The next thing, at the end of the summer, as I'm rehearsing, the person who put this together was like, "Yeah, I don't want to do this anymore." And here I am now. I'm like, "Oh my God, like I lived for that." Like I remember driving home an hour at midnight, being tired but so wired. So then that struck up the, how am I going to like meet people? What do I do from here? I learned to play the guitar and I started to go to open mics. So singing and playing guitar is kind of where it started. And then I got into writing my own music at this point. And I feel like writing my own music is probably the most healing for me because it allows me to get my feelings out on whatever's going on. And then out comes this piece of music.
Do you have any inspirations or like famous musicians that have really helped help I guess inspire your kind of genre of music?
I feel like it's more of just dealing with my emotions. So I wouldn't classify it as anything in particular. My first release song is probably more of like a pop punk, pop rock, not pop punk, pop rock feel to it. But my favorite musician is Pink. And one day I hope that she will sing my song because I know she's been through a lot. And like I've seen her on like interviews, I saw her in concert. She just seems like the most genuine of musicians. So she's definitely one that has inspired me.
Yeah, and her lyrics too are very kind of uplifting as well about just not really caring about what other people think and just being your true authentic self.
Right.
Um yeah, yeah, no, she's awesome. I like watching all her like acrobatic kind of stuff too. It's really
Yes.
interesting. Yeah.
She's amazing in concert. I have to go see her again.
Yeah, that's cool. So have you ever performed live before or is that something that you want to do in the future?
Oh yeah, no, I've definitely performed live before. So the first song that I've written and released is called Take a Deep Breath. You'll find it on any music platform under Jennifer Rebecca. Take a Deep Breath by Jennifer Rebecca. And I've sung that at like multiple suicide awareness events. So it's part of my mission at this point. So I've released two songs, Take a Deep Breath, and then I just released what's called Your Mask. And that one's more about like living in your authenticity. So they're both kind of the caps of my healing journey. Like at the very beginning, Take a Deep Breath is about my journey through suicide and mental health and reminding people that you're wanted here. And then Your Mask was more towards the end of the healing journey. Again, it never ends, but it's more of where I'm like, yeah, I'm really good in life right now. Like, and it's about being true to who you are, which is partly why I feel like some people deal with depression and anxiety because they're not being true to themselves. So, I actually just over the weekend did my first mental health event where I was public speaking. So, my public speaking was sing Take a Deep Breath, then I spoke, and then I closed my speech with Your Mask.
That's cool. Put like bringing everything together and
Right,
yeah, that
because that's just me. So, if I'm gonna be out there trying to help others, I have to be true to myself, and music was a big part of my healing journey, so why not incorporate it in my public speaking events?
so speaking of public speaking and music, I know you briefly mentioned that you're writing a book. Uh, how is that materializing for you?
I'm about 15,000 words in right now. Mm, and basically what I've done with that is I started pretty much documenting everything that I went through, not getting into details about trying to take my own life, but just like how erratic my behavior was and certain things. Like there were certain phrases that I really could not stand when I was depressed, like somebody saying you're crazy or it's all in your head. Certain keywords that would just like shut me down when I was suffering. So I talked a little bit about that. And now, like, I'm talking about some of the stuff that I've talked about with you, like how I started working with Laura. And then I think I just started getting into like working with Mark. And so, like, because those are parts of my healing journey. So it's really just like my journey from, okay, this is where I was, this is what I was going through, this is how I'm getting to where I am now. And trying to just inspire others to say, listen, it's okay. Like, it's okay to not be okay, but don't go anywhere because you have no idea what's waiting for you.
You got a lot of projects going on. You got the book, you got your music, you got your public speaking, you have your company. Oh my gosh. And you're a teacher too, special education teacher. There's a lot going on.
I released my first course too. It's called Calming the
Oh,
Chaos, which is on my website, betteringnow.com. So it's just simple techniques that I've used to help go through my own process of healing that people can do without having to work with another person professionally if they choose to do it on their own.
how does keeping busy help with the healing process? Do you notice that kind of doing all these different things that it helps kind of like occupy time or maybe helps bring you into the moment?
Many days it's been helpful for me, especially with some of the ups and downs of life where sometimes life is just hard and you just don't want to think about how life is hard. Other days it's kind of like it's not helpful because I overschedule myself. So that's still something that I'm working on, like, because I know that, like, when you are overscheduling yourself, sometimes it's because you don't want to, like, look within yourself and, like, feel empty or alone. And I'm not feeling empty or alone. I just happen to be so passionate about so many things that I just don't want to stop. And that's so, like, there's the difference is I'm not trying to, like, avoid life or being alone and feeling my feelings, as I will feel them anywhere I am, even at work. If I'm upset and I cry at work in front of my kids, I will cry at work in front of my kids. Like, I'm human and I know that it's okay to have all of these emotions. So for me, it's just sometimes I just have so much that I really want to do that I'm like, I just can't stop. That's all it comes down to for me.
With all these projects, what does the future look like for you?
I technically have 7 more years left in teaching after this school year. If I wanted to go out in 5 years after this school year, I have to financially support myself. Um, so that's, like, up in the air, but my intention is to fully be out public speaking, like, all across the country at some point in life and then do the coaching. But I feel like public speaking is more my thing, and then coaching is kinda secondary to that.
How does that correspond with when you were a kid, like looking at yourself in the future where you're at now? When you compare these two outlooks on life, if you were to like look at yourself back then, would you ever imagined that you would be at this point?
Looking back, like, I don't remember what I used to wanna be growing up. I don't know how I ended up in teaching, to be honest. I mean, I like teaching a lot. It's changed a lot in the 25 years I've been doing it. I do remember wanting to be a physical therapist and not getting into the college that I wanted to go to for that, and somehow I ended up teaching. I can't really think back and say, "Oh, I remember wanting to do this or I remember wanting to do that." I don't know how public speaking came to be on my plate other than this journey. Like, because it is scary. Like, I don't want to talk at a faculty meeting at school, right? In front of my colleagues, but yet I just did a public speaking event and didn't bat an eyelash. Obviously, it's different. You're sharing your story and you're trying to inspire and help others. So it has so much more meaning to it that it's not even scary for me. It's like, all right, I just tell my story. I was a little nervous I might forget my transitions, but other than that, I was like, I got this.
How important do you think it is to have an aim in life or to actually have like a purpose or something you're building towards? Do you think that is a very helpful thing to have in your mindset?
Absolutely. Like, I remember when I was really depressed, and as a teacher, you have the summers off unless you choose to teach summer school, right? Or you get another job outside of school over the summer. But I remember like being home with my kids over the summer. I didn't want to get another job. I had kids, so why not just be home with the kids? And but I remember that unscheduled time was really hard for me. That's like when I was most depressed. Like the transition of, okay, we're coming up to winter break. Now I'd get depressed, or now I got to transition into summer. I would like 2 weeks before the end of the year, I would feel myself starting to slip into that depression before school even ended. So I remember thinking, how am I going to do this when I actually retire? Like, how am I going to have all this free time? Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. Here you go. I have a whole purpose now. Like, traveling, public speaking, coaching. My whole future is pretty much set other than when I actually leave teaching.
So Jennifer, we're getting towards the end of our podcast episode, but I just want to ask you these two very abstract questions. I kind of want to know your opinion on them. So the first one is, what are some things in life that make you happy?
That would be music for sure, dancing, being in movement. So whether it's going to the gym, running, playing sports, anything to just keep active, and then time in nature. Like I love to go hiking. I love water, so like I love hiking and finding a good waterfall. And I love the beach. So, like, I went to the beach a few weeks ago to meet somebody, and it was not a warm day. We weren't planning on it being the beach. We were just meeting in the middle. And turns out where we were, a state park, there was a beach there. And it was probably a high of 50 degrees. And I still took off my socks and shoes and I put my feet in the water and I just let the water like flow over me. And yeah, so nature, movement, and music would be the top 3 things that just make me so excited.
I couldn't agree more with the whole nature aspect too. For me, I love being out and going on hikes out in nature, being in the woods, and I kind of that kind of brings back to the point we were talking about before about even the spirituality and kind of understanding your place in the universe and how you're a part of something much bigger than yourself. It definitely being in nature kind of brings those feelings to mind and really at least helps me get into a more like peaceful state of mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Um, the other question I want to ask you is, looking back at everything that you've gone through in life, um, what would you say to people that are along the journey that feel like they're hopeless and that no matter what they're doing, it's really it's not working for them. Maybe they're at their lowest low. What would you say to them about the healing process and what should they really know?
I would remind them that they are loved and they are wanted here and that they need to understand that they are not burdening anybody else because of the fact that they are suffering and that I am there to support them in any way that I can because I've been through it. And I would remind them, I was where you were and look where I am now. So even if you feel like you can't get there, you can get there. Just continue to fight and keep looking for what does work for you because there's things like that work in one moment that don't work in another. So like there are so many different ways to bring ourselves back to the present moment. Like if we're having anxiety, putting in like a sour head in your mouth or cinnamon gum, like all of a sudden now you're taking the focus out of what you're thinking about and you're like, oh, that's sour or oh, that's spicy or whatever it is. Like, so take a moment and breathe, or there's so many different things. But if it doesn't work today, it could work tomorrow. The more we build our toolbox of different techniques, one of them is going to work for us, even if it's just for that one moment we need to pause and say, okay, let me stop where I'm at and let me try something different. If we just keep going and we let that wheel play over in our head and we don't stop it in the moment, that's where we could get into trouble. But one small thing, one moment can change everything.
Well, Jennifer, I want to thank you for being here today. I know this is a super important conversation, and it really these. I mean, you're making a difference out there, and just even this conversation too. Even if it's one person, know that they're not alone, and that there are other people that have gone through this process before this healing journey. I think that's a really powerful thing. And how would people learn more information about you and your story. I know you mentioned your website. Do you want to maybe talk about a little bit more about your resources that you provide?
Well, I do all different forms of therapeutic work in the non-traditional way. So I do the timeline technique. I do different techniques to help you uncover the root causes of what's going on inside of you. And I teach you how to reframe things, and just depends on like one-on-one conversation to figure out what it is that you need. I have a big intake form, and then from that we look at, okay, how can I help you today? And like I said, I have the course Calming the Chaos, which is available on my site as well. That can be done individually as just like a online course, or I do coaching sessions. I'm actually going to be putting together like group coaching starting in January. So if anybody wants to get on that, people can find me on Facebook. I have a women's group, primarily women. Harmony Haven, Calming the Chaos for Women. So people can find me there, and I will do anything I can to help somebody. And if I can't help you, then I'm going to refer you to somebody else that I know can help you.
That's fantastic. And what's your website?
Betteringnow.com.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about during our time here today?
I think we've covered pretty much everything unless you have any other questions.
No, I think that's it on my end. So I just want to say, Jennifer, thank you so much for being here today. This really means a lot. This is a great conversation, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.